Hello all, we are the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I'm James.
Today we are discussing the Apocalypse Element, which is the 11th Big Finish release in the main range. It's written by Stephen Cole and was released back in August 2000. It's pretty lengthy, hombre.
It's no so greatest, but
God.
it is over 2 hours.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 17 minutes thereabouts. It does have the 6th Doctor and Evelyn with a return, and this isn't really a surprise because she's on the cover, but with the return of Romana, technically speaking, Romana II.
Yeah, I believe we last saw her in Warrior's Gate, which I think was a must, but I also know some people really liked. So,
well, maybe it's not so much a must, it's just more than our little minds can comprehend. But
yeah, conceptually a bit out there.
But from Big Finish itself, here's the plot. When the planet Archatrix is threatened by a Dalek assault squad, the Doctor and Evelyn become embroiled in an ever-deepening mystery. What has become of President Romana, missing for 20 years? What lurks in the vast gravity walls of Archatrix? What is the secret of the ancient element the Daleks are synthesizing? And how does Gallifrey feature in the plans? The Doctor finds that if his oldest enemies cannot conquer the universe, they will watch it go up in flames. So, as you can tell by the plot, it's sort of a high-stakes story. And also, it is the second part of the sort of three-part prequel to Dalek Empire. We already covered the first part, which was the Genocide Machine with the 7th Doctor and Ace. And this is part 2 of that, and this is also a 5th Doctor one later on.
Now, is that the Mutant Phase?
Yeah, the Mutant Phase. I think it's actually only a couple stories away. But
yeah, I think you're correct, yeah.
And like I said, this has the 6th Doctor, Colin Baker. You get some Maggie Stables voicing Evelyn. Lalla Ward is back as Romana. And Anthony Kitch voices Van Sol, who is a member of the CIA, the Celestial Intervention Agency.
Yeah, and we first met him in The Sirens of Time, the very first Big Finish audio story that we covered way back when.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he was a character I particularly noted. I guess it's also important to say that given that was our first experience with audio, it might have been difficult for any random Gallifreyan to stand up much anyway.
I mean, yeah, that's almost certainly true. I wouldn't mind at some point maybe going back to just listen to it again, not talk about it again, but just going back to listen to it again. To see if we can glean anything more from it another time around. That, if it even happens to be for later.
Yeah, and obviously I think the big news in this one is, well, naturally the return of Romana, who, like James said, was last seen at the end of the East Page trilogy. And since then she has ascended to some high heights. She apparently made president of Gallifrey.
And while, of course, we have not read it, apparently there had previously been mentioned in Happy Endings, the 50th Voyager New Adventure novel featuring the 7th Doctor. Which, just looking at the cover, looks like it's a lot.
But as they often say, the tallest tower is always the quickest to fall. Because she may be president, but she also becomes a prisoner of the Daleks for 20 years. So that sounds fun.
Maybe not for her. In fact, she sounded like she was having a really bad time when you first meet her.
No, I mean,
the beginning of episode 2?
Yeah, I mean, 20 years for Gallifreyan for a time that doesn't really mean that much. But still, I can imagine being trapped by the Daleks for 20 years might become a bit dull after a while.
I mean, she had some nice snippy lines to the Daleks, but yeah, no, she was not. Understandably, she wasn't having a great time.
The Daleks are fun, though. The Daleks are always fun. There are some classy pieces of dialogue. The self-confidence they possess is to be admired. As they say, quote, victory for the Daleks is assured. So you have to appreciate where they're coming from. And they even get some nice action sequences. There's a sequence, I think it's at the end of the first episode, in which the Doctor's investigating some gravity walls. And he is attacked by some Daleks who are outside of the casings. So that's sort of a fun vision to image in your mind.
Yeah, and it's not one we get either particularly often either. Usually when Daleks are around, they're almost always in their case. It's very rare for them to not be in their case. But because they were in a gravity wall, they actually had more mobility not inside the case in this rare instance.
One thing that I think it's one of the first things that really stuck out to me. So this is the third adventure the Sixth Doctor has with Evelyn, at least as far as Big Finish is concerned. I have no idea if they maybe fit other adventures in between what we've already listened to. But we had the Marian Conspiracy, which was her first appearance, and then of course Spectre of Lane Moore, which was like modern day, right?
I think that was modern day, yeah. Well, with the Brigadiers in it.
Yeah.
So it had to have been modern day.
Yeah, so that's just a modern day story. Whereas, of course, naturally the Marian Conspiracy wasn't historical. But this is, as far as we know, her first experience in space. But it doesn't really, I mean, there's a couple points. One, it doesn't really feel like it. Like, she doesn't seem particularly wild at being in space. Now, I don't know if maybe it's not like an under the world type thing. Maybe she doesn't see the stars around her. Maybe she's just in a conference hall and has no idea that outside. Well, she has an idea, but she does sort of comprehend that I'm actually in space. But it just seems very, very low key. Like even Ryan said, "Hey, alien planet, man."
No, I think it was alien planet, man.
Yeah, well, see,
that's the best he had.
Yeah, but even Ryan had something, and it doesn't seem like she's all that wild about it. It just seems sort of felt odd. Part of that, though, might have to do with the fact that since they brought Romana back, it sort of almost takes away some of the focus from Evelyn. So instead of focusing a lot on what they could have focused on, like, hey, I'm in space. And I guess this also the point that a lot of times it's younger companions that the Doctor takes with him. So maybe someone who's more wise and sure of themselves. I mean, she's a college professor, but I would still think that she'd have some type of reaction. But because they brought Romana back, I imagine they wanted to spend, of course, more time with Romana. And I'm not even sure if they particularly did a great job of making like an emotional connection between the Doctor and Romana. They traveled together for some time, and I'm not sure if they even really felt like there's a deep connection there. But that might just be me.
No, I have to kind of agree with you. I mean, it is complicated. I think the problem is they try to fit so much in one story that I think in a lot of ways, I wouldn't say drop the ball, that's going way too house, but it wasn't all that it could be in terms of a reunion between the Doctor and Romana.
You know, I think it's sort of almost, in my opinion, a common theme with stories centered around Gallifrey. I mean, there's some decent ones. I'm personally a big fan of The Invasion of Time. Hashtag controversy, hashtag deal with it, but it's a fun story. But honestly, a lot of stories that feature around Gallifrey, I'm not particularly fond of. I mean, I don't hate them, but they're just like more average to me. And I think it's partially because they always try to fit, oh, this is the Rod of Rassilon and the universe is in danger and us time. It just, a lot of it just doesn't interest me that much. And it's almost, I don't just say doubly worse because it's not exactly worse, but so you have the whole Gallifrey thing, and despite what the plot said, a lot of this, I would say what the last 2 episodes take place in Gallifrey?
Yeah, the last 2 episodes are on Gallifrey.
So, after this story takes place on Gallifrey, which you can't really tell from the plot, but I can understand wanting to, I guess, sort of hide it away. But not only do they have a lot of Gallifreyan scenes here, they also have the Daleks who are enjoyable, but they're also they are the most well-known antagonists of the Doctor. So it's sort of like, generics maybe too harsh, but you have a expected antagonist with a setting I never cared that much for. So it has 2 elements that I don't love, and I guess I'll just say that this is, at least out of the Big Finish things you've listened to so far, and it's only been 11, but this actually is my least favorite so far, which I'm not sure if I'm entirely surprised about, but it's sort of disappointing.
Well, see, I guess you're speaking for yourself, I wouldn't say it's my least favorite. I guess the thing is, I don't really look at it in that same type of way when I'm thinking of favorites and least favorites. I mean, for me, you throw in some Dalek voices that are really good, and of course this is Nicholas Briggs, I believe, doing the Dalek voices in these hours good. And just the way that they always are so self-assured of themselves, that usually makes me like it automatically. Not as a great story, but just more enjoyable than that. And of course this had that in this page, and plus it has a hint that, I don't know, spoiler alert, the Daleks maybe knew a bit more about what was going on than they let on, as the Doctor learns.
Yeah, I mean, the Daleks, this may come as a shock to few, but they play a long game. They have a goal in mind, and hey, they always say go for your goals, and they're just a personification of that. Or Dalecification. That does not flow off the tongue nearly as well.
Yeah, and it's horrifying that the Daleks maybe hold a motivational speech. It's all those people's faults.
One thing I did appreciate about the story, I guess more than the stuff I didn't care for as much, I sort of like the character. Well, I don't like the character, but the character of Van Sal, who's a member of the Celestial Intervention Agency, the CIA. The CIA, well, I mean, you know the real life CIA, they're just awful. So this CIA is not much different. The Doctor doesn't really care much for them, and it has they have such a sense of entitlement, like any advancement in time travel should just belong to the Time Lords. The other species, even if those species are the ones who made such advancements, they should have those abilities. The time travel is apparently too big of a burden for them, and only the Time Lords, in out of infinite wisdom, should have that power. And in fact, the CIA, they're even talking about another species, and I forget the nature of this specific time traveling ability that this other species had. But someone said that it should have been Gallifrey's, even though they didn't create it, they didn't make this advancement, it just should have been theirs.
Yeah, plus it was even doubly hilarious because the Daleks had just stolen the ship. And no, they don't, of course, have sympathy for the fact that this one species ship is stolen by Daleks. They're like, oh, it's sort of been ours. Which is exactly what you'd expect from that type of quasi-imperialist mindset. Where you think, oh, if it's gold, that makes it ours automatically.
Throughout the appearances in Doctor Who, Gallifrey and Time Lords have never been shown in particularly great light, and I mean, it's hard to do that. Even the replacement president who took over once Romana went missing for 20 years. I mean, he starts out like he's an older guy. I forget who voices him. Seems like a decent guy, but then he later says that they broke no aliens on Gallifrey because these aliens are looking for some type of shelter, like, hey, they were just attacked by the Daleks, so you help us, please? And like, hey, we broke no aliens on Gallifrey. I mean, you can see how that often Time Lords can just come across as pompous dicks.
I mean, to be fair, they are. And I guess it's just part of their inherent nature. I mean, not only pompous, but xenophobic too.
Yeah, it just adds to the charm, the long list of charms. We do also see the return of the contact, the telepathic connection that Time Lords have, both with other Time Lords and with themselves. James mentioned earlier that the Silence of Time is just the first Big Finish Doctor Who release. And we saw the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor use contact to speak with each other. And we also, I mean, I think, I forget if it first appeared, but we've previously spoken about the 3 Doctors, and naturally contact makes an appearance there. So it's always sort of nice, and you sort of expect to see it in like a Gallifrey-based story. Just a quick way to exchange information.
Yeah, plus I think the most interesting thing about it is it even shows up in Spyfall from the 13th Doctor, which is fun that it was remembered to actually show up there.
And also speaking of like past references, it did give a quick mention about the Doctor's time as president.
Yeah, and that gets kind of complicated because, as we've talked about in terms of Gallifrey, I'm not sure what their own internal time is in relation to other things. But, of course, the Doctor declares himself a candidate for president in The Deadly Assassin. The other candidate ends up dying. And, of course, the Doctor didn't do this seriously. He only did it to invoke some Gallifreyan law, so he wanted to be executed on the spot. So he technically becomes president at that point. And I know that's continued up in The Invasion of Time, where he acts as president for a bit, in a rather hilarious story from Tom Baker, which, of course, is Tom Baker. He was great at those bombastic events, and that was quite bombastic. And I know that the presidency also came up in the 5 Doctors, and it had to have been referenced in Arc of Infinity, although I don't remember it, but we've only seen Arc of Infinity once. And last but not least, at least in terms of the original series, because sadly, although I would have loved to have seen it, there were no 7th Doctor stories on Gallifrey. Could you imagine the 7th Doctor dealing with the Time Lords?
I can't imagine he would have the patience, to be honest.
No, but that would have been what made it great. But the Doctor tries to bring up the fact that he's president to stop the trial from happening. And of course, Colin Baker is the trial of a Time Lord. And he's told, oh, you're not president anymore after your various times you just leave. And last but not least, there is, we've not listened to it of course, but there is a 5th Doctor story entitled Time in Office, where apparently the Doctor is forced finally to actually be president. I have no idea how that story goes, but just the concept sounds hilarious. One thing the Time Lords might have learned from this event is, well, of course, by episode 3, the Daleks invade, well, a small force of Daleks invade Gallifrey, which apparently is one of the early acts of the Time War, which is always fun when such events get retconned into that. Of course, one of the earliest acts being the Time Lords trying to have the Doctor exterminate the Daleks before they were even existent in Genesis of the Daleks. So, I mean, great job, Time Lords, as usual. But the main security the Time Lords were using at this time was retinal scans, of course, using your eyes to open doors. No, I'm not quite sure how that works, because the Time Lords, they regenerate, but perhaps as soon as they regenerate, they get their new eyes into the systems. But the Daleks were like, retinal scans, that's interesting. Then, no, I'm not sure how, because the Daleks, they don't have hands, but they ended up at least taking one person's eye out, if not multiple people's eyes, so they could open the doors. Now, again, technically speaking, the Time Lords, if they happen to die from this, they sort of just regenerate. And it's odd in this episode, I don't remember any Time Lord just regenerating. In fact, the Time Lord President, the acting President, dies at the end of this episode, or near the end. Maybe he was on his last regeneration, but he doesn't regenerate either. So it's stuff like that that makes it maybe not lazy, but maybe they could have at least referenced it.
Yeah, like I imagine there was a reason for it. I sort of think that maybe they. Well, actually, I don't know, but I imagine there's a reason for it. But it would have been nice if they just threw in a line to explain that a bit.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that didn't end up happening. But I guess until the regeneration, there's just going to be a lot of one-eyed Time Lords wearing eye patches going around the Citadel for a bit.
And I guess not lastly, but again with some references to some older material, we get to see both the rod and the sash of Rosalind, and related strongly to them, the Eye of Harmony, all three of which, if I recall, made an appearance in The Deadly Assassin.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember the Fourth Doctor just being... Well, actually, maybe it was even the Invasion of Time. Either way, I just remember him looking extremely ornate, with these items being presented to him. Could have been both of them, actually. Were there really no Time Lord stories between the two? I don't think there were there?
Not to my recollection.
No. But yeah, the Fourth Doctor looks absolutely amazing when he has the rod and the sash, and he just looks glorious. He is a true Time Lord President.
And this may go without saying, but the Eye of Harmony also played a part in the 1996 Doctor Who movie.
Yeah, no, that one, again, alas, my brother and I have only seen once. So, I remember it popped up at the end of the movie, and I remember the movie just had this strange feel to it. But I think that was probably unavoidable, considering the circumstances it was made under. But I'm so however it was doing in the movie, it had a good purpose. But yeah, really, I can't remember what it was doing in the movie. Something near the end.
If I had to guess, it has to do with the destruction of a universe, but that seems to be how the Master always be doing.
Well, yeah, that's the way the Master works, so...
And actually, speaking of which...
At least he's consistent.
Well, that's true. Speaking of which, like I mentioned in the beginning, this is sort of a high-stakes story. In fact, the Daleks are able to successfully invade Gallifrey. They're going through the Citadel, just shooting down Time Lords. And like James mentioned, the tearing eyes out to actually be able to pass through doors. It's actually a pretty smart plan by the Doctor. Big shock, the Doctor's a smart plan. But to sort of fix the interface so it only works with a human eye, there's only one human here, Evelyn Smythe. So her eye would be sort of the key to open doors. I sort of liked that. That was fun. I don't think the Daleks cared much for it. They got by in the end.
I mean, it did give Evelyn some more importance in the story that mostly would they have had a room for her to do anything. As it is it Matt's room, but it's something at least. And there was a good scene near the end, I suppose, where the Doctor's breaking down, basically. Well, having a small breakdown.
Yeah, which in the circumstances makes sense, because the Daleks, they had access to this, what they called an apocalypse element. And they also had crystals which increased the amount of power. I'll be honest, I'm not sure exactly how everything connected, but they were able to use the crystals to harness the apocalypse element, and they were going to destroy a universe if the Doctor and the Time Lords did not give in to the commands of the Daleks. So it's sort of like holding a universe hostage unless the Time Lords obey the Daleks. So yeah, that was a sort of a tense standoff, and you could say that it didn't necessarily have the happiest ending either.
Well, maybe not for that universe, but it had the happy ending for the Daleks.
Yeah, which really shouldn't be a big shock, because like we mentioned, this is sort of part 2 of 3 in that sort of a pre-Dalek Empire type thing. In fact, the Daleks sort of lay it out through the end of the story where they said they were to sort of create like a new Dalek Empire from which they can, I forget the word they used, but the basic idea is, hey, they were to rule the universe and they want a base of operations, so they want a nice base of the empire. So again, they had a goal and they're reaching for it. So well
Which is
done.
impressive for a species with no arms. But honestly, no, I really did like that ending. I'm not going to say it made the whole story worth it, but I liked it nonetheless.
I do think the last episode is perhaps like the most stable in terms of my personal enjoyment, just because things are coming together, and especially toward the end, once we learn some more things, I think I was enjoying things a bit more. But I guess before we get into our final thoughts, did you want to jump into the timeline?
As listeners to the Brothers Mahoney know, and if you're listening, hi, hope you're doing well. The TARDIS Wiki, which is a amazing source for Doctor Who knowledge, has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish, and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, which cost $200 in some cases per book, and everything else in between. The Doctor Who universe is a lot more than just a TV series, if you were unaware. Doctor Who canon as a whole is a completely jumbled mess, and it has been for basically forever. So for me, it's just personally fun to see where the stories, where this casting fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me. This one, well really, any Big Finish story with the Sixth Doctor and Evelyn, all of them take place after the last televised story of his, which of course was the last part of the trial of a Time Lord. And in terms of the Big Finish stuff, this would take place after the Silence of Time. Now, of course, they had all three Doctors. This takes place after the time period, of course, with the Sixth Doctor. Now, we didn't see Evelyn in that story because she didn't first appear until the Marian Conspiracy, which was the sixth story, and of course, the Silence of Time was the first. But it turns out it's revealed in some later audio story that she was in the exploding TARDIS that the Sixth Doctor saw. And of course, much like River Song is all fine, she's not been exploded. And right after this is going to be the next Sixth Doctor Big Finish one we talk about, I believe. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. Blood Tide, which I believe has, what is it, Sea Devils? Or is it Solarians?
I think it's Sea Devils, but I don't really know.
Either way, it has a really cool cover. But of course, I believe we have at least a 7th Doctor and a 5th Doctor story before we get to the next Big Finish 6th Doctor story. And of course, there's always the possibility that they'll throw in another 6th Doctor and Perry story because I know Is has Perry. And hey, we even have Frobisher coming up at some point. And I'm sure he'll be a hoot to meet.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think that's that far in the future either. It's our relative. That's a joy of time. It's our relative.
Which is ironic in saying we're talking about Doctor Who.
I guess I'll just have some quick final thoughts about this one. This was a 2 hour and 17 minute story, and for a lot of it, I just wasn't entirely feeling it. I think James is partially right. I think they tried to fit too much into this one. Like, maybe they should have even bothered with Evelyn. I know she was important story-wise later on, but if they had focused maybe more on the Doctor reconnecting with Romana. I mean, Romana was in prison for 20 years, and it seemed like at the beginning, in the first scene, she was having a bad go of it. But past that point, she seemed perfectly fine. It just didn't resonate with me much. And I do think, in terms of personal enjoyment, it's not like a bad story, because the Daleks are fun. I mean, the idea of the Daleks invading Gallifrey, I think it's a fun idea. But I just didn't care for a lot of this, and it just wasn't really something I got a lot out of. But I'm just hoping that later on, because I know they're going to be having other stories later on in Big Finish featuring around Gallifrey. And I'm just hoping that they can, I guess, make it feel a bit more personable, a bit more relatable, because this, and I might not know exactly what the issue was, but this just didn't quite work for me.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, again, I didn't dislike it as much as my brother did. Looking through all of the other Big Finish things we've listened to right now, Whispers of Terror I didn't love as much as my brother did. Although I still, of course, loved all of the 6th Doctor Perry scenes. I was always a bit iffy on the Marian Conspiracy, just because I thought there was at least one quasi-major plot hole, if not two. And also Rod Down, while it did have some charm, the 5th Doctor's always been a bit harder for me to get into. But there is something about the Gallifrey stuff that just isn't the most intriguing. I think we feel people have said that about Gallifrey stories for a very long time. I think even in the 70s, people were saying, hey, these Gallifrey stories are not really my cup of tea. Yes, of course, the Invasion of Time has people who don't like it. Now, part of that's partial effects. But I don't know. I think the ending helps it a lot for me when you realize mostly what the story is a setup piece for the upcoming Dalek Empire series. And I think it sets up well enough. We already got a bit of that in the Genocide Machine with Sebastian McCoy. And while that didn't make it obvious that they're setting anything up, this one certainly does. I'd love at least a callback to the Genocide Machine and perhaps this one as well in the next story that the Daleks feature in, which I believe will be the 5th Doctor's The Mutant Phase. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It wasn't an amazing story by any stretch of the imagination. But on the whole, it's never going to be my favorite Big Finish story. But I do think it is pretty good setup for an event that obviously the writers are planning to make an event. So I'll give them some props for that. It's never going to be a favorite must listen to suggestion of mine really at any point. Because like Michael said, I realize that Time Lords are more emotionally resilient, but I would have liked to see some more reaction out of Romana than her first couple of scenes. I get that you don't want to create a damsel in distress character, and there would have been danger of that. But at the same time, being a prisoner for 20 years, well, I guess for a Time Lord might not be much in the scheme of things, it's still 20 years. But I guess they did what they thought they could fit into the story, and there's already a bit of a longer story anyway, over 2 hours. So I'm not going to hold too much against it, but I'm also not going to put in any lists of best Big Finish stories. Not even best Big Finish stories featuring the 6th Doctor and Romana, even if this is the only one.
Yeah, but naturally, that's just what we thought about it. So we would be curious to hear if you've listened to this one, and especially if you've listened to more Big Finish, like if you've listened to a bunch of them in the future, how this one sort of fits in with you. Because like you said, this is only the 11th one in. There's so many more. So it's just like the tip of the iceberg. But yeah, let us know what you thought either down below or on Twitter. And well, what do we have? What do we have up next, James?
Next up, we have a very special discussion. Our very first novel, Doctor Who related, of course, The Wheel of Ice, a 2012 novel written by Stephen Baxter, featuring the 2nd Doctor and, of course, Jamie and Zoe. And so we've had this one planned for a while. We just haven't gotten to discussing it, and now we finally will. It's interesting in the fact that it's not part of any ongoing series. It's not part of the Missing Advances or Past Doctors line of Doctor Who series. It's just its own book. And it's made even more interesting in that it came out in 2012, and yet it just features the 2nd Doctor. So I'm not sure why they decided, hey, let's put this one out now, but that will be our next discussion. Any thoughts on what's upcoming, Michael?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to jump into your first book. I think we mentioned, and I can't even remember when, I think we mentioned in the previous discussion that we were reading this or had read it, and we just never put out a video about it. So it'll be nice to finally get to this one. And I mean, the 2nd Doctor's always been among one of my favorite Doctors. So having the first book discussion be a 2nd Doctor book, I think it's really fun. But plus, there's Jamie. So I think it's very much worth looking forward to.
I mean, we are slightly limited. We can't really discuss any of the 7th Doctor, Voyages and New Advances novels just because, really, for those who have to start at the beginning. And so we decided to maybe kind of ease ourselves into Doctor Who novels by starting with something newer before we pick around the Missing Advances, or what's the other, Past Doctor Advances?
Yeah, the Past Doctor is the BBC one. Look forward to that. I think it should be fun. But yeah, that is all for now. As always, this has been the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael.
And I have been James.
And we wish you a pleasant night.
And remember, as the Daleks say, obey. Mostly just the Daleks, but obey, it's important. But we'll see you later, guys.